Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Samuel Haq, Physics Department first semester, and I welcome you all to my presentation on the topic of the differences between American and British English. English is a global language that is spoken in many different countries around the world. However, the English language has evolved differently in different regions, resulting in significant differences between American and British English. My presentation will focus on the main differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and culture differences between American and British English. I will provide explanations for these differences and their implications for the language learners and travelers. To begin with, let's take a look at the historical background of American and British English. English evolved in England and spread to America and Britain. However, as time passed, American and British English evolved independently, resulting in differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar. For instance, differences in pronunciation were influenced by historical events such as Latin and French influences, migration patterns, and cultural norms. These differences are subtle but important to note as they reflect the evolution of the English language over time. Moving on, let's take a look at the differences in spelling between American and British English. American English has simplified some spellings such as color COLOR, while the British English has simplified it as a COLOUR. Other examples are center and program as well. These differences were also shaped by cultural and historical influences. While these differences may seem minor, they can impact on effective communication. It's important to be aware of these differences to avoid misunderstandings. Next, let's discuss differences in vocabulary between American and British English. Many words have different meanings in American and British English. For instance, chips in American English refers to thin, crispy slices of potato, while in British English, chips refers to thick, fried potato pieces. Similarly, crisps in British English are thin, crispy potato slices, while in American English, crisps refers to chips made of corn or other grains. These differences in vocabulary can lead to confusion for language learners. Understanding these differences is crucial for effective communication, especially for travelers. Moving on, let's talk about differences in pronunciation between American and British English. Many words are pronounced differently even when spelled the same way. For example, the word tomato is pronounced with a short A in American English like tomato, while in British English it's pronounced with a long A like tomato. These differences in pronunciation can affect the way words are understood and spoken. Accurate pronunciation is vital for effective communication, and being aware of these differences can help avoid misunderstandings. Let's move on to differences in grammar between American and British English. Differences exist in verb conjugation, prepositions, and word order. For instance, American might say, I just ate, while in British English, the phrase would be, I have just eaten. These differences may seem subtle, but they can significantly impact on communication. It's essential to be aware of these differences to avoid misunderstandings. Finally, let's talk about pop culture references and their influence on language use. Pop culture references highlight differences between American and British English. For example, the Harry Potter series uses a lot of British English expressions and vocabulary. Similarly, the TV show Friends features American English expressions and slang. Cultural differences influence language use in pop culture, making it a fun way to learn about differences in American and British English. Understanding these differences can make pop culture more enjoyable and accessible. In conclusion, it's essential to be aware of the differences between American and British English. Understanding these differences can help avoid misunderstandings and improve effective communication, particularly for travelers and language learners. To recap, I have discussed differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, spelling, and culture between American and British English. I have highlighted how these differences were shaped by historical, cultural, and social influences and why they matter for effective communication. I hope this presentation has helped you gain a better understanding of the differences between American and British English. Thank you for joining me today.